Good morning, world changers. It's the start of another new year, which means it's an opportunity to start creating the life that you truly want to live. I'm Suzy Beaumont and I'm the founder of Change Your World. And today, to kick off 2024, I'm joined by transformation coach Will Murtha to explore the 5 basic principles to become your true, authentic, congruent self. Abraham Maslow was a humanistic psychologist who called reaching this point self-actualization. He described self-actualization as the process of becoming everything you are capable of becoming, which myself and Will firmly believe is achieved when you commit to a consistent personal development practice. And this is the core aim of this group. Change your world every day, and why I'm so passionate about personal development, as I've experienced states of self-actualization many times because of my self-improvement practice. Over the course of the 5 days, we are going to explore Maslow's hierarchy of needs and how to work through these levels so that you can create lasting change and transformation. So welcome, Will. Happy New Year to you. What are you planning and creating in 2024? What's in store for you?
Start at the beginning, probably leaving the planet, Susie.
Yeah, I know.
I've worked it out. I've been doing this work for 25 years and self-development. And yeah, I've worked out the quickest hack will probably be to leave the planet. No, seriously, we're not all going anywhere. And I think what we're really, my big thing for this year, I mean, it's lovely to be back with you, by the way. Happy New Year. It seems like the last 4 years have been very heavy, very dark
Mm.
sometimes, very exhaustive. We've all gone through an emotional tsunami, call it.
It
And
has been, hasn't it? Yeah.
it just seems that we've gone through so much, and we should be proud of that. And we've seen it with our clients, just like you have. And I think the thing that I'm coming to as we go into this year is that we've got to get back to basics. And I think that's why me and you have both followed Maslow for so many years. Basically, humanistic psychologist Abraham Maslow came up with the hierarchy of needs. He basically talked about 5 levels. He put self-actualization at the very top of the peak of that. And at the bottom, which I think is what a lot of us need to do now, we're going to talk about one per session. We're going to start today with number 1, which is build a solid foundation. So, we all need physiological kind of needs met, for safety. And I think,
And just to
we're
clarify those needs, so we've got air, water, food, shelter, sleep, clothing, and reproduction.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that the reason why, we all sometimes want to know why everybody is in the way they are. Why are people in such a kind of frenzied state? Why are they so anxious? Why are they so, not kind of being able to empower themselves and everything? And I think we have to come back to Maslow in that unless you get a foundation in for your personal development, and this is kind of a thing for everybody to take on board for this year, and for people that you might observe around you. If you're working in a business, you've got people working with you or even for you. I think we all have to understand, if we don't get the basics right first, then everything else is just not going to sit on top of it. And I think the reason that we're going to start this today is that it's all about survival. We've got to, number 1, turn complexity into simplicity, and really start to look at what are the basic things we need to put in place. Self-actualization is great. It's a great thought. It's a great kind of goal to get to. And you can read all these books on manifesting and doing great things. But unless you get the basics right, then it's gonna be like kangaroo petrol, isn't it? Your personal
Yeah.
development is going to have periods where you go for weeks or even days on and up, and then you crash again. Then you go up and you crash again. But what we're talking about is build the foundation, and you'll have a much better chance of making it sustainable, won't you, throughout the year?
Yeah, and that's the thing, you can't build a house on dodgy foundations. So why are we trying to create a life on dodgy foundations? We will, you might have peaks and troughs where things are going well, but if those solid foundations are not there in place right from the start, as you're saying,
Yeah.
then, things will crumble, the habits will fall, the personal development, the self-actualization won't be reached. You might have states of it, and I've experienced, I mentioned in my intro, I've had states of self-actualization where I just feel like I'm really in flow, everything is happening, it's going really well, but then I let my practice slide because I become complacent, or I think I don't need to do that anymore. I let these healthy habits slide. And then as a result, that's when I see self-actualization not happening. But it's also, I think we need to be clear that, well, I don't know. What's your thoughts on this? Can you stay in a state of self-actualization, or is it just you do have peaks of it?
I think, God, these are big questions, aren't they? I think my personal opinion, especially after the last, me and Jane have probably done more coaching,
For
with our
people that
coaching
don't know,
practice.
Jane's your wife and your
Yeah,
business partner.
yeah. So, I think we've done more coaching in the last few years than we've done in the rest of our careers, combined. And I think obviously it went mad March 2020 with lockdown.
Yeah.
A lot of fear, a lot of paranoia, a lot of, oh my God, what's happening, Armageddon. So, we've learned more. I think I've learned more in the last 4 years than the last 25 years put together.
Mm.
And I think what clients have shown us is that all the self-help books that are out there are great, talking about flow, talking about manifesting, talking about this and that. But there's very few books out there that are just talking about basic managing your emotions, managing your thoughts, dealing with your inner critic, building the foundations, which is what we're going to talk about today, doing the basics right.
Mm.
All the other stuff is valuable, but coming back to your question, I don't believe you can live. This is one of the maladies of today's society, isn't it? We can't be in a high flow, high emotional, happy state all the time. Because if we set that expectation, when it's just not human life, we have a emotional wheel of hundreds of different emotions, if not more emotions that we go through, some of them dark, some of them light, some of them heavy, some of them light. And I think what we've got to do is appreciate that we've got to work through the ebb and flow of life, which means the ebb and flow of our emotions, which means that, it's not about knowing what to do when we're in flow and we're in high emotion. That kind of looks after itself. When we're happy and elated and ecstatic and in flow, life just seems to happen without us having too much effort. It's like kind of jumping on a surfboard, isn't it, Susie? You kind of, it's happy. The question is, have we got the tools and the philosophy and the basics in place to deal with that darkness and that depression, and when we feel that things aren't going our way? That to me is the secret, and it's often one that too many people don't talk about.
Yeah, and I mean that's the thing, isn't it? It's like consistency is the key. Consistency and all those habits that build our solid foundations, keeping them up, but keeping them up when we do go to the dark places, when we are hit by the curveballs, the challenges, that kind of thing. And that's essentially what we're going to talk about today, is like, how do you build that solid foundation? And I mean, the one thing that why I really wanted to do this coaching week with you and talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs is because when I first learned about it about 20 years ago, I remember thinking then, wow, our world really isn't set up to help people achieve self-actualization. And because I'm doing my counseling course, we've been reintroduced to it, been going through it again. And again, even more so here, 20 years down the line, and I'm thinking, wow, look at our world right now. So people, you mentioned about people being in survival mode. We've got energy crisis, we've got wars going on, personal challenge. We've come through COVID. We're still dealing with the ripple effect of that, of the pandemic, and lots of changes, people questioning what their life is all about, what the meaning is, what their purpose is, just struggling to make ends meet. And the first level is all about having shelter. Do you get enough sleep? Are you food, water, all the provisions that we need? And when people are struggling financially, for example, just taking that as an example, because we've got this energy crisis and bills are going through the roof, and everything has gone up, increased in price because of the pandemic, because of Brexit, because of all sorts, prices are going up. People kind of think, I don't have time or the luxury to do
Or
personal
energy, or
development
energy.
or energy.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Don't have the, personal development is a luxury, because right now I'm firefighting. I am reacting to the crisis that's in front of me,
Mm.
and you know, I can't afford to do personal development. I can't afford to sign up to that course or read that book or take on that one-to-one coach or counselor or therapist, whatever it might be. So how, I mean, I've been in that position, and I realized, because I remember, going for a life coach with Alistair, my life coach that I've worked with for many years. And I remember at the time, I really was in a lot of debt and I couldn't afford it. But I remember thinking, if I do not invest in this, my life isn't going to change. I have to do something different. However, if you are literally at the end of the poverty line and you're really struggling to even feed your family, how do you start to get out of this survival mode, this crisis, and start changing your world?
I think I mean, there's 20 different windows we could come in here. But I think the first one for me is that, you've got to be journaling. You've got to be, if you're not recording what you're thinking and you're feeling and getting it out of your head, thoughts, out of your body, emotions, and onto the paper so that you can look at it reflectively, mindfully. I don't think if you don't start to do that, then it all just stays in the cosmic kind of soup within your head, doesn't it, in your body?
Yeah.
And actually, then you've got no chance. But so the number one thing for me, people have asked me this for 10 years. We've been recording what's the number one personal development tool that people need to use to help them start this process. We list 20 things. 10 years, number one consecutively, including last year, journaling. So it works. It works for your personal development. Now, the word I would always use, go to write a piece of paper or go to your journal if you have one and write down, what am I tolerating at the moment? What am I
Mm,
tolerating? Now, it will either be tolerating stuff in your own behavior that you're not happy with anymore,
yeah.
that you're just sick to death, you're sick of, you just can't handle it anymore. Or it be something that someone else is doing to you. It might be a job and a toxic boss. It might be a partner that you're thinking, I'm not going to be abused anymore, narcissistic partnership. I'm not putting up with it. I've put up with it for 20 years.
Mm,
So, write down, what am I tolerating? Because the minute you break that elastic band of, I'm no longer going to tolerate that anymore. I mean, if you ever seen anybody trying to glue a elastic band together, Susie, it's not possible. We all reach a breaking point.
mm,
So, it's a bit like the darkest hour is the one before dawn. If at the moment you are feeling desperate and your life's never going to change and nothing's going to shift and I'm always going to be this way, nothing's going to improve, know that the biggest point is often that darkest point before you break through and the sun comes up. So the toleration is actually a good thing, because it's showing you that you're no longer prepared to tolerate a certain aspect in yourself or others' behavior. And the minute that elastic band breaks, hallelujah, you're in the game and you're
mm,
starting to practice. So, start off with journaling, because you're going to start capturing things that might not always be obvious to you, because they're all mixed up with thousands of other emotions and thoughts. And of course, what you're trying to do is pick off one or two,
mm,
a few dozen of them that are going to make a difference. Because behavior change, which is one of the fundamentals, which I'm always talking to people about, is that behavior change doesn't work by just changing your behavior and then you change the next day. Behavior change is like the addiction kind of patterns. It's like smoking, for instance. You know, everyone that has stopped smoking knows that they don't often do it the first time. Same
mm,
with drinking. You know, you
Same with
don't
any
just
addiction. You go
any
through the
addiction.
cycle.
You don't sort of, you know, we've got to remind ourselves and be gentle with ourselves that you don't just stop an addiction and then the next day you change your life forever. What
That's
tends to
actually
be
part of
happening?
the process, because you've got to go back to it to realize the pain of it and realize I don't want to do this anymore. You
Yeah.
know, you've got
And
to
so
be
what
reminded
happens?
of it.
Exactly. You know this because you've worked with your clients as well, and you've known enough people to change your world over the years to know that habit change means you start, you break, you fall down, you get up again. You start the loop again. Right, I'm going to start the diet. I'm going to stop smoking. I'm going to stop drinking, and then go for a little bit, and then you break again. But you have to appreciate that the falling down and getting back up again is 99% of behavior change.
Yeah.
Very few
It's also
people,
part of the learning. It's the process, isn't it? Yeah.
we don't change through sunshine and light. We change through pain and suffering. And the moment you get to a point where you will no longer tolerate enough pain and suffering is where you will start to go, right, I've got to change for my own survival, my mental health, my spiritual health, my emotional health. I've got to change because if I don't change, I'm going to break. I'm going to break down. I'm going to not even be here at the extreme. And actually, that pain is there as a message to help. It's almost like a hidden anti-hero, isn't it? It's there to, the pain and suffering is there to actually drive you on. It might be masked in a different way, but the pain and suffering is no different to fear. Fear is actually your friend and not your foe. But the problem is we all stay away from fear because
We'll
we think
avoid it.
it's the bad thing. But
Well, it's
actually,
uncomfortable. It's unpleasant.
it's uncomfortable, and so is pain and suffering. So
Yeah, choose your pain. Choose your
when we
suffering.
get pain and suffering, realize that it's your body's way, your mind, your mental, your emotional, brain. We've got three brains, by the way, brain in your head, brain in your heart, brain in your gut, all linked by the polyvagal nerve. We've actually got three brains. That's something we can come on to kind of, in number 4 or 5. But for now, know that your heart has got a brain, your gut has got a brain. Your gut instinct is telling you when something's not working for you anymore and you've got to change.
And I think that's an important thing to make. I want to come back to the journaling, but when we feel that pain, you mentioned about avoiding it. That's when we distract ourselves with the scrolling through social media, the alcohol, the cigarettes, the sweets, the chocolate, whatever it might be, sex, gambling, whatever your vice is. That's what we use to distract ourselves and avoid the pain because we can just blinker away from it and not deal with it. And I mean, going back to journaling, I mean, there's so much science and evidence about journaling and what it does for you, for your mental well-being, your health, your happiness, the success of keeping those habits consistent. But I also know clients that I've worked with, friends I've worked with, that when I even mention journaling, that they roll their eyes and they're just like, oh, don't. I mean, one, it seems so simple, and you think, how can I change my life through that? But I mean, from my own personal experience, I mean, I don't journal every day. And, it's something I would like to get to a point of. But, I haven't prioritized it. I was going to say I haven't got time, but that's bollocks. I'm going to swear like a tree because it's just I don't prioritize it. But what I will do when my brain is full and my head is full, or I cannot figure out something and I'm like, I don't know what direction to take. I don't know what to do with the situation, or I just feel stuck, or just feel I don't feel great. I will write down and go, what's going on? And what I find incredible is that stuff pours out onto the page that I didn't even know was there. I get insights that I'm like, whoa, where did that come from? And I didn't, but it's just such a creative process that I don't think that you cannot get out of you unless you channel it in a way. Now, journaling might not be the thing for you. I mean, another way that I get these kind of insights is going for a walk in nature. That's another way. But the frustrating thing is I get all these insights and I don't have a pen and paper to write it down. So I'll sometimes I voice record because I'm like, oh, I must remember that. But then, of course, I forget to check my phone. So what is really good about a journal is it's there on black and white. You can read back because you do forget this stuff. You know, you can have these like almighty light bulb moments. And then a week later, you look back and go, how did I forget that? Why did I not implement that? You know, what have I done? So it is really important to try and get into some kind of practice of journaling and using it as a tool to get you out of these situations or start the process. And that's another thing that I want to highlight, and you touched on it, that, you know, change doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah.
It is a process. It takes time, and it might take 5 years to get yourself out of your current situation. But that time is going to pass anyway. So let's start moving forward in the direction that you want. You know, it's always progress is better than staying stuck. But I wanted to pick up on, you know, we talked about when somebody's in this place of extreme pain, really, you know, really challenged and all the rest of it. But what about the category of people that are in a place of, it's not that uncomfortable, it's not great, but it's not horrendous, and they're just in this kind of mediocre place where life isn't, you know, it's not that painful, but you know it could be better, but it's not painful enough to kind of force them out of that situation, you know, to start creating. You know, they're not experiencing their enough pain, and they're not that toleration, you know, that they are tolerating something, but it's not in the same level of, okay, I've reached my enough point, I cannot take this anymore, but
Right. So
they need to change.
right. So the best way I've kind of developed over these years is that I think we pick up clients at 3 different stages.
Okay.
And I'm going to explain, because I think this is really important to know the stage that you're at for what and how to deal with it. Now, imagine you're in the sea, you're bumping along the bottom of the seabed. Sometimes we pick clients up and they are absolutely desperate. I'm not talking about near suicidal, but they're moving towards that very rapidly.
Well, certainly towards burnout, exhaustion.
Burnout, exhaustion.
Yeah. Relationships are failing.
Nothing, everything's falling apart. You know, they're bumping along the seabed. Right. So there's different kind of tools and, you know, survival tools like today that you need to get to the basics. Right. And some of them basics would be, you know, keep it really simple, because you haven't got the capacity. You're like the memory on a phone that's got no more capacity. Yeah. So you've got to remember, when you're bumping along the bottom, you haven't got much time for personal development, the big stuff, you know, the heady stuff. So you've got to keep it really basic. What am I tolerating? What do I need to do more of? What do I need to do less of? What's working for me? What's not working for me, and why? And really forget the big lofty goals. You know, when you're in survival and you're bumping along the bottom of the sea, you just need to get your body back up to the surface to breathe again. Right. So, you know, if you're there, don't start reading self-help books with lofty affirmations of getting in flow and being great, you know, creative and the rest of it. You've just got to survive and get to the surface again.
We're talking about, let's look at your sleep. Let's look at drinking more water. Let's look at the absolute basic of self-care that can build you up to have some more energy. Yeah. You know, going for that gentle walk, not a massive run or anything like that, or even a 7-minute workout. If that's where you need to start there. Don't think, right, I'm going to do an hour in the gym or 2 hours in the gym.
Do one thing. Don't plan elaborate plans for what your program is, and just do the next thing in front of you. And I've always talked about this compass, Susie. You know, you've heard me mention this before, is that, you know, this next thought, this is why the journal's so important. You know, this next thought, this next feeling, this next word, this next action, think of it as like a compass, you know, a true north. Is it moving me closer to who I am and where I want to go? Or is it moving me 1 degree away from who I am and where I want to go? And literally do it action by action, thought by thought, feeling by feeling, and just start to get up off the floor and start to crawl and then walk. And that's the basics.
Yeah, and I mean, that really is, because we do overcomplicate everything, and it comes down to actually choices. Yeah. Is this choice moving me in the direction closer to where I want to be, or is it taking me away, like you said?
Simple. Keep it really simple, because you have not got the capacity for reading big books, for watching 2 hour kind of, films or podcasts, because it's going to fill your head with too much stuff that's not just about survival.
Mm.
You need the very basics. So think of it as like being the scientist of your own life. you know you need to decide. It's no good reading these books, watching these, reading these, listening to these podcasts. You've got to work out what the roadmap is for you and your character and your history and your emotion type, introvert, extrovert. Are you a highly emotive, empathic and sensitive, or you shut down? You need to work out. That's why journaling is so important. You need to work out where you are and who you are first, so you can have the appropriate antidotes. So that's the bottom. That's the bottom. Then we move to the middle, which is what you kind of alluded to 5 minutes ago, where you came in, is that the middle ground is literally you get yourself back up to the surface water. You can breathe again. You've got sun on your face. You're floating along the top of the water, but you're still not flying yet. You're in the what I call the middle sandwich zone. So you might feel a bit lost. You feel a bit confused. What's my next move? I'm feeling a bit hopeless. You're not desperate and just struggling to survive at the bottom of the seabed, but you're floating almost aimlessly like a piece of driftwood. And you're kind of trying to find purpose and meaning and passion and who am I? Where do I want to go? So I think this middle point is actually where a lot of the population are, I find today. I mean, do you want to add to that? Because it's I find a lot of clients in this sort of zone at the moment.
Yeah, I do want, because I do remember that situation when I started working with my life coach, Alistair. And, I did this was after sort of 2-3 years. And in fact, it was probably longer than that, but I got to a point where I was out of the seabed and I was back to a point, and I'd kind of sorted out all the obstacles, all the things that had been holding me back. I'd got rid of them and I cleared it. And I remember clearing the decks, and I was in a position where, I had resources, I had support, I had a good network around me, I had the finances, all these kind of everything I needed to create the life that I wanted. And I remember thinking, okay, there's nothing holding me back now. I've got a blank canvas to create the life that I want. And it absolutely paralyzed me, because I was like, okay, I've run out of excuses now. What actually do I want? And it was, the first bit had been all about the firefighting and the, clearing the absolute carnage I'd created in my life and the chaos and all the things that distract me from, as Maslow says, becoming who you are capable of becoming. And I was like, okay, what now? And it was a really difficult situation, because I was like, okay, I've been actually craving to get to this point, and here I am, and I don't know what to do with it. So again, that was me moving up the levels and going, okay, well, let's start cultivating. Okay, how do I want to shape things? How do I want to shape my relationships? I want my career, my business. How do I want to work my working life, my finances? All these different things. And that is still an ongoing process. It's evolving with each level I go to, and as I evolve, because when I reach a certain point, I find, I don't know if it was you actually, but I remember somebody telling me this analogy where you're on a staircase and you get to a point and the staircase is absolutely filthy. It's covered in debris and weeds and all the rest of it. And you clear off that one step and you get it all and it looks great and you're fantastic. And you sit there and you're like, this is nice. I like it here. Yeah, this is good. And then you start looking over time. You start looking up at the next level, the next step, and you think, okay, am I ready to tackle that? And then you start tackling that and you start weeding it, clearing it, all the rest of it. And you go on to the next level, and then you sit there for a while and it's comfortable and it's happy and you like it. But again, you start looking to the next level. And that's what we're talking about here. It's really getting to that point, because we are, as human beings, limitless. And I don't think we realize, or that message is certainly not communicated in our education systems and on our TV screens and media, that just how powerful we are and how much we can truly achieve with the right environment, resources, role models, and, and personal development.
And the thing is, we're talking really to, this session and number two, which is the next safety level, level two, safety level of Maslow's hierarchy, really talks to everything between the seabed and the water surface. That's what we're going to be doing, like, this next couple of days, because there are certain things, regardless of whether we're floating. Now, the reason when we're floating on top of the seabed, metaphorically, that we've suddenly got this, oh, I'm a bit confused now, a bit lost. What's next? Where's my passion? When you were surviving, you didn't even have time or energy to think about that, did you?
Yeah. No,
You know what I mean?
absolutely not.
When you're literally breaking and worried about money and relationships are coming apart and your health is going to the dogs and whatever's happening, you are literally putting all your focus on just surviving the next moment. So of course you haven't got time to be bored or confused or lost at sea.
Yeah.
But what happens once you build, what you were kind of saying, which was brilliantly portrayed, by the way, is that, it now then brings another set of problems that you didn't have before, the luxury of what's next.
Yeah.
What's next for me? And so what we then got to start looking at is, okay, what do I really want? Because, the number one question in coaching is often, what do I want?
Yeah.
But you can only ask that question of yourself or clients once you've steadied yourself and stabilized yourself and now swimming on top of the sea. So once you get to that point, the question is, okay, what do I want? How am I going to get there? And the most important question that most people don't ask, Susie, which like just befuddles me now, is who do I want to become on the way to getting what I say I want? Because that part is always neglected. Now,
Yeah.
why is it important? Because you are going to change as a person, which means your relationship to yourself is going to change on your journey. Also, the person that you're with, that's going to change your relationship
Yeah.
because you're changing. And I don't think who people want to become is a question that not nearly enough people even ask themselves.
And that's it. I mean, this is just fundamentally, it would be great to see that in the schools and get people thinking, okay, the question, what do I want, is important, but who do I want to become? How do I want to feel? How do I want to show up in the world?
Yeah.
How do I want to connect with people? Who do I want to connect with? Those kind of, which gets you thinking about all these different things. And I think it's important to highlight that, if you are coming out of survival or you're currently in survival, that question of who do I want to become and what do I want will change as you go up the levels, because your needs become different, your purpose, your meaning, and all that. So it's okay because I mean, one of the things, whilst I'm talking here, I'm thinking, gosh, some people might be listening to this and thinking, it sounds like you're never satisfied. You reach another level and you're like, oh, I want to go up to the next step. But it's not about that. It's about realizing the capacity that you have and the abilities that you have and the limitless abundance that is there for you to tap into if you've got the right solid foundations in place.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm conscious that we're overrunning, as we always do when we're in our conversations, Will. So we've talked about journaling being your first step. So let's say that, some takeaways for people to go with today. So they go away, they start journaling, they start writing things down. And I mean, it is a case of just doing complete brain dump. It doesn't have to be prescriptive in any way. Just get it out of your soul, basically. Get your emotions out, get your feelings out, and write like nobody is ever going to read it. And if you're worried about somebody reading it, burn it afterwards, just get it out. But say, they've done that process and then they go, well, that's all, seems so unachievable, you know, the dreams, what they want and all the rest of it, or it just seems so difficult. What do you do at that next stage to get these solid foundations in place so that you can build growth?
Right. So two of the things that are also before we move into action stage, because this is what the whole science and literature, scientific literature says around change, behavior change, and coming out of addictions. You've got to build the inner world first to make it strong before you even then start the action bit. So in this first stage of build the solid foundations, we're not even going to go into action. We're not even going to go into action because you've got to build the emotional strength and tenacity and resilience first, so you don't keep kind of launching, failing. Now, two of the things that we've not mentioned that you've got to get a grip on is fear. Now, fear is the kind of bogeyman of humanity. You know, fear has slayed more people's dreams than we would ever care to mention. And, you know, fears, we've got to start looking at fears as obstacles. They are obstacles to growth. If we want something enough, the fear is an obstacle in our way to break through and to become more. So, you know, grab your journal and start writing down what your fears are, because you can't start to change if you don't start becoming aware of the self-sabotaging traits that are likely to be waiting for you at every corner. So the biggest fears that come up for me always in client, well, for myself, I'm not immune to it, and obviously clients' lives, fear of failure, fear of I'm not enough, fear of rejection, fear of FOPO, fear of other people's opinions, fear of losing your job, fear of being found out, you know, imposter syndrome, fear of your partner leaving you, fear of dying. You know, these are big fears. I could list 30 big fears that are human fears. I don't care if I'm coaching one of my high performers at one end, or someone that's just ready to break down and have a real bad phase of their life. I don't care. There are fears in all of us. And fear is something that if you don't get a grip on it, it's like emotions, really. Fear, which is, it's one of the most powerful emotions. If you don't get a grip on your emotions, they will get a grip on you. And fear is the same. So we've got to, until you sit with fear and understand what the fears that are driving you underneath the surfaces are, you can't control them. You can't manage them. So, the second one is understand that energy is emotion. Take the French word, émouvre, energy in motion, emotion. And what we've got to understand is that in all of our education, never has it paid enough attention, not nearly enough, to how important getting to grips with our emotions are. Emotions drive us forward, but they also hold us back. If you think of our inner critic, that kind of damning self-talk that's inside of us, it will not let go sometimes. If we keep fueling it with more negative, darker thoughts and feelings, it will take us over. You're not good enough. You'll never do that. That person will never go out with you. You'll never get that job. An inner critic.
You're not deserving of it. You're not worthy.
You're not deserving. You're not worthy. So we've got to understand that, all these emotions, especially that are kicked up by the inner critic, the anti-hero, I always say with clients that with emotions, if you name it, you claim it. And what I mean by that is that you can't change anything underneath your surface until you start to sit with it and realize what emotions are holding you back. And this is where journaling is so important, because it will help you to understand what your fears are. Great. Later on, further up the process, we can talk about desires and motivations and goals and intentions. But first of all, you've got to shore up the system, plug the gap, stop the water coming in. And the way we do that is to go front and center. The problem for this society and the way we've kind of grown up in the last 50 odd years in modern life is that we bury our fears. We put them in the water, and of course, like a beach ball, we keep pushing our fears down. And what do? They pop up with more velocity. So we've got to start sitting with our fears, and part of that is understanding what is going on for us emotionally.
I mean, when we look at the first level of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it's all kind of practical things, having shelter, clothing, air, water, food, these resources, reproduction, making sure that we're keeping the population going. But it's almost like none of these can exist until we manage the emotions that are limiting us from achieving this, or so getting that solid. So we kind of feel like we need to add fear into this level and saying, get on top of your fears and start facing them, because fear is painful, but also is staying stuck and being in that situation that is putting you in survival mode, or even in the mediocre mode. They're both uncomfortable, painful. So it is choosing your pain. And we know that even growth is painful, but at least pain towards growth is worth it when you come
purposeful. It's purposeful.
Yeah, it's purposeful. Yeah. So I think we need to leave it there today, because I'm conscious that we've got 4 other days to do. But thank you again for today, Will. And I look forward to speaking to you again for day 2.
Right, lovely. Thanks for having me. And yeah, I look forward to catching up again. Thanks, Susie.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.